Hello, my name is DDwinell. We're going to be talking about the composer Igor Stravinsky today, more specifically his piece Symphony of Psalms. It is a three-part movement. Today we're just going to focus and key in on that first movement. So genre. The piece is indeed what the title kind of suggests here. It is a symphony. It is presented by a full choir and a small orchestra. The choir is kind of the main key here, key element. A lot of individuals in this choir, very full, very thick texture. We'll go into a little more detail later on here. So let's talk a little about the melody. The melody is kind of like the chant-like structure we've been seeing, the plain chant, stuff you'll see in kind of like masses, things like that. The harmony is in the chord of C. The texture, it is a very thick texture like I suggested earlier. The choir is kind of the big main feature in this piece. You'll have the soprano lines, alto lines, tenor and bass lines. So it is a bit of a variations you'll see in this piece. It does have pieces or moments of monophonic texture. This is when the individual lines, even though there's many voices, they're still singing the same melody. Homophonic texture, this is when the vocals and instrumental lines all come in kind of together. We'll see many pieces, polyphonic sections here as well. This is when all the vocal tracks come together. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the dynamics of the piece. You'll notice once we get playing it here in a few minutes, there's moments of very, very soft or piano elements to it, and then when the texture comes together, like I was talking about, very, very thick texture with all the lines and all the instruments coming together. It becomes very fortissimo, very, very loud. So the tempo of the piece, lento. So this meaning slow. It's kind of that way throughout, doesn't change very much. It's a very slow piece with that plain chant style. The form is in an AABC form, meaning there's two repetitive melodic motions or melodies that are followed by two unique sections. So the timbre of the piece. The timbres kind of in the low register. I did say that there was a soprano line. It doesn't come in very often. Mainly those low registers kind of foreshadow and kind of take the lead on here. Even the instruments chosen, the oboe is a great one. It'll show kind of, we'll get into that a little more later on, the word-music relationship really plays a key part with the oboes there. But they'll mainly stay on the low register as well. Pianos, strings are kind of still low as well. So here, oboes. So the oboes, in the word, like I said earlier, the word-music relationship. They'll have the up and down motion throughout the whole piece. It gives a very uneasy feel. Even the strings kind of present that as well. This pairs great with the text, as we'll get into. The text comes from a psalm. Depending on what version of the Bible you have, it's either usually about Psalm 38, 39, or 40. But I'll read the text here for you guys. So the psalm, believe it's in 30 in my Bible, or I'm sorry, 40 in my Bible. But it says, the English translation will be, "Hear my prayer, O Lord, and with thine ears consider my calling. Hold not thy peace at my tears, for I am a stranger with thee, and a sojourner, as all my fathers were. O spare me a little, that I may recover my strength, before I go hence and be no more." So this individual speaking to the Lord, he's very desperate, trying to call out for the Lord. So we'll see that in the word-music relationship here. Very uneasy feel. There are some melismatic moments here as well. The emphasis on Domine, which translates to Lord. So there's very significance that Stravinsky wanted to put on that word to kind of give its greatness, give its heavy feel there. The texture as well kind of gives us a good translation to what Stravinsky wants us to feel. When the texture becomes very, very thick with all the vocal lines, one specific point is when the text says, "Hear my prayer." All the lines come in, and it's really, really dominant, kind of very desperation feel to it, really strong feel. That's very important lines for the text here. So we'll get into the actual piece here. This is, I found on YouTube here, a piece by the Yale Symphony Orchestra. They do a great job presenting here, and without further ado, here we go, okay? So again, Yale Symphony Orchestra here. You hear those oboes right off the bat, very easy feel. It's giving up and down motion. The piano and strings come in, same kind of theme, desperation, uneasy feel it gives the audience. Here's the choir, chant-like, many individuals singing these lines. Highlights the fortissimo dynamic range there, very loud. Piano has those low register tones to it. And that was the end of the first movement there. That's the one we're going to be focusing on. Towards the end, you saw that how thick that texture got. All the vocal lines coming in, all the instrumentals. So let's get into Igor Stravinsky himself. So his time period is 1888 to 1971. He was Russian born. Throughout his lifetime, he did obtain French and United States citizenships. He is a son of a famous Russian opera singer, so music's kind of in his blood there. He did study piano and music theory and orchestration. Mainly the piano and music theory, that's when he was younger. His dad kind of took him under his wing. The orchestration part, that's when his mentor, Nikolai, took him under his wing later on in his life there. So his, kind of his basic styles, Igor Stravinsky, first kind of started in the Baroque period there, and eventually got to the neoclassicism style, which we'll kind of talk about a little bit later. So the Stravinsky timeline here, he grew up in Russia. Like I said, he was Russian born. He got his training early on in piano and musical theory. He really didn't want to follow in his father's footsteps with music. Stravinsky obtained a law degree before going into and kind of piquing his interest with music. So Nikolai, he was his classmate's father. Nikolai was a famous Russian composer who eventually mentored Stravinsky. This is when Stravinsky kind of got more studies done with orchestration, really putting things together, and under his mentorship there, Sergei Diaghilev, he was a Russian impresario. which is basically a music promoter that noticed Stravinsky and his talent. So Stravinsky eventually relocated to Paris, which that's where Sergei was, to collaborate with him. So here Stravinsky kind of did his best work, in my opinion. That being, he wrote a lot of ballets with him, very controversial sometimes, kind of testing the limits there of the audience. There was eventually, with this piece, Stravinsky, he wrote a ballet or a score for ballet, The Rite of Spring, which he was most well known for. This became world famous. This is a piece where there was an actual riot in the audience because the music was just so outrageous, not seen before. So it really wasn't accepted by the public then, but eventually it became well known, which made Stravinsky world famous. So this has kind of led up to Stravinsky becoming a French citizen. He kind of established his residence in France. So here at Paris, France, Stravinsky made a livelihood as a pianist and a conductor, working hand in hand with Sergei, that promoter. He eventually had a religious conversion. This kind of affected his musical work. As we see here, the Symphony of Psalms is based on a psalm from the Bible. He had a couple other here, but this is the one we're kind of working on today. So Stravinsky, later on in life, he made his way to the United States. He was a speaker at Harvard University and eventually took up residence in Hollywood, California, and obtained his United States citizenship. April 6, 1971, this was the death of Igor Stravinsky. He died in New York, New York, and he was buried kind of back home in Europe over there. He was buried next to his close friend, that promoter, Sergei, in Venice. So let's put a little bit of historical context to the time period when the Symphony of Psalms was written or composed. So World War I pretty much had just ended. There was a huge economic depression throughout Europe. So this kind of was why Stravinsky kind of went to Paris, France. For some reason, Paris, France kind of was immune to this depression for a little bit, so it kind of, all these artists flocked to this area. This was also the reason why neoclassicism kind of birthed from this travesty World War I, the economic depression. Not many people had the resources to throw at these artists. There wasn't that many instruments anymore. Everything was kind of in production for the war. So we'll see. I'm not sure if you can see the picture here, but it was an interesting fact. This is a Japanese war signaling kind of radio device. They called them war tubas. So that was kind of interesting. Kind of shows you the glimpse of why there wasn't many instruments available at that time. So neoclassicism kind of referred back to the classicism period, getting away from the Baroque style where there was a lot of ornamentation, a lot of pushing the boundaries of the music. This kind of went back to the key elements, very basic forms, more simplistic music style. So Paris, France, like we said, this is where the Symphony of Psalms was composed. Like we said earlier, it was immune to that depression led by and caused by World War I. This is where a lot of artists kind of fueled and flocked to Paris here. It fueled artistic creation. Stravinsky and composers weren't the only artists flocking to this area. Here's a couple key ones you might recognize. Salvador Dali, Pablo Picasso, and the writer Ernest Hemingway also kind of was in this time period in the same area in Paris. So a couple interesting facts about Stravinsky. Stravinsky, like I said, he took a residence in Hollywood, California. He actually got honored with a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. He is the only classical composer with this honor. You can see his star at 6340 Hollywood Boulevard. The band U2 and Stravinsky have a couple things in common. They both use the Psalm 40 verses 1 through 3 as lyrics. Like I said, there can be some variations depending on your text, what version your Bible is. Most of them Psalm 40. U2 used it in their song called 40, and Stravinsky, of course, in Symphony of Psalms here. So a couple modern connections. Kamasi Washington, he is a hip-hop saxophonist and composer. Not many people may not know his name, but his works you may have heard before. He toured with Snoop Dogg, Lauryn Hill, and Kendrick Lamar. common hip hop artists in today's society. So here's a quote from Kamasi Washington. He's referring to Stravinsky here. He said, "When I heard this piece by Stravinsky, referring to the Symphony of Psalms, I had a vision of how amazing it would be to improvise over it." So I'll play you a clip of his work here. This is from Kamasi Washington's album called The Epic. It has a very first track here, just about 30 seconds or so. So when I play this, listen for the background of the kind of the chant-like chorus going on behind the music. And this is where I think he's referring to getting that Stravinsky style in his work. Very jazz-like saxophonist. And just listen to that choral line. There we go. So that chant-like chorus in the background, definitely straight influence from Stravinsky there. So another notable connection here, Walt Disney, famous film Fantasia in 1940 when it was released. It features some of Stravinsky's work. His most common score, The Rite of Spring. If you're familiar with the movie, I think it's about the time where the dinosaur scene is. And another interesting fact here is that Stravinsky was the only living composer when this film was released. It's not by any means the only composer featured here, but he was the only one living at the time of its release. And that pretty much sums up Igor Stravinsky and his Symphony of Psalms. Hope you enjoyed it. Here's my works cited. Alright, thank you guys.